Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Lesson Planning with the 4Cs. It's going to be a very exciting webinar today. My name is Jamie Trujillo, and I will be moderating the webinar, and I'm here with the brilliant Kristen Waring, who is going to be your presenter. So just before we get started, as a reminder, please make sure to have yourself muted so that there is no background noise. And if I do mute you, because I have that capability, you can unmute yourself when you want to ask a question or make a comment. So with that, I will turn it over to Kristen.
Thank you, Jamie. And good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see a lot of new names and faces in this webinar. I'm excited to have you all here. Today, our topic is going to be lesson planning with the 4Cs. And specifically, although it's not in the title, we're going to be talking about online lesson planning with the 4Cs. So the 4Cs, if you're not super familiar with them, we're going to be going over them today. And since we're all kind of in the same boat with teaching online at the moment, we're going to be talking about how to adapt that to online lessons. So let's go ahead and get started. As Jamie said, if you have not yet filled out the form here, I've got the link up on the screen. Make sure if you're going into this to fill it out that you capitalize the C and the S, and it should only take you a minute to do it. So we'll give you a couple minutes here, and then we'll get started with our connection activity.
I also put the link to the form in the chat, so you can go to the chat and just click directly on that link.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Jamie.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we've got 3 responses so far. I'm going to wait just a minute and see if anybody else is going to submit that form. Okay, so if you haven't finished submitting it, go ahead and keep going, but we're going to talk about the responses here. And so the first question on this form said, in brain-based learning, the term 4Cs refers to. And it looks like a lot of you have some experience with this already, some not so much, and that's okay. Because 4Cs does refer to different things in different situations. But in this one, what we're talking about for lesson planning has to do with brain-based learning, and we're talking about the number 2, the second choice, which is connections, concept, concrete practice, and conclusion. And we'll learn more about that as we go through the webinar. The second question said, a connection activity should. And while make everyone laugh is probably something it should have, it's not the most important part. What we need to do is, it looks like some of you chose introduce the students to each other, and that's part of it. But for the whole thing, we're looking at the third answer, which is link learners to learners and learners to the topic. So a good strong connection activity will do both of those things, and we'll talk about those again in just a minute. All right, fact or fiction. I've decided that I like fact or fiction much better than true or false. It seems a little bit more fun to me. So the question is, students learn best when given all of the information at one time. And it looks like everybody chose the correct answer for that. It is fiction. We want to break it up into small chunks so that students can learn it easier and remember what they learned. And the next question is, when practicing a new skill, Students should, and again, it looks like everybody got that correct. Awesome. They should be actively involved and engaged, okay? Not just sitting and listening to you talk. The next one, fact or fiction again. Interactive means passively reading slides, watching slides fly in and out, or viewing a video segment inserted in a slide set. Now, while some of that is important at some times, it's not active or it's not interactive, so that would have been fiction. The next one clarifies fact or fiction. Interactive means engaging the viewer or learner in some way so that he or she has to do something like write, talk, choose, fill in, cross out, collaborate, move. I'm sure there's other things we could put in there. So that being said, while they're watching those videos or those slides flying in and out, to be interactive, they should have something to do at the same time. And the last one says, please let me know what you want to learn or take away from this webinar. So this was just for me. I wanted to see what you guys wanted. So how to use things online, new ideas for remote learning, how to make virtual learning fun, how to make it open to all instruction, and to make the lesson plans better. So that's what we're going for. A lot of you already know how to make a lesson plan or how to take what you need to teach and give it to students. What we're going to be talking about today is how to make it more fun. And let's go back over here. So that being said, before we get started any further, I just want to give a shout out to Sharon Bowman and her wonderful books and website. She has some great insights into brain-based learning, and her presentations and her topics from TBR is where I got the information that I'm going to be presenting to you today. So if any of you are interested in learning more about brain-based learning, training from the back of the room, 4Cs, any of that stuff that we're talking about here today, you can go to this website, bowperson.com, and there's all sorts of additional information for you there. Okay, so for this webinar, you're going to need, because we're going to do an interactive webinar, you will need some paper, at least 2 sheets of paper, and you're going to need something to write with. Markers, colored pencils, crayons are preferable. If all you have is a pen or pencil, that's okay. Not quite as much fun, but it's okay too. So I'm going to give you just a minute to go get your supplies if you need them, and then we will move on to the next part of the lesson. Or the webinar. I'm sorry, I'm in that teacher mode today. Okay, so once you've got your paper in front of you, I want you to take one of the pieces. It doesn't matter if your paper is lined or not, but I want you to take it and divide your paper into 4 sections by folding it. How you choose to do that is up to you. You can see some examples up here. It doesn't matter to me if you're rectangles or squares or triangles. I think folding circles might be a little more difficult, but if you know how, please share it with us. You can also just draw these pictures, but sometimes folding is a little bit more active, and this is something you could do with your students as well. So fold it into 4 sections. If you want to draw lines across those folded lines to make it a little cleaner, that's up to you, but you're going to be using this to take notes on today. So once you've got your paper folded, I want you to label it in the way that I have shown on the screen. We're going to have C1, which is connections, in one square or one section, C2 concepts in another, C3 concrete practice, and C4 conclusion. So you need one label in each section. Okay, so remember, this is your graphic organizer that you're going to be using to write down some of the ideas that I'm going to be giving you today. As we go through at the end of each section, we're going to be talking about tools for your online toolbox. Consider this somewhere to write ideas for your toolbox. This is just for you. And if you need more room, you can always turn your paper over and write on the back side of the paper. If you do have any questions along the way, please put them in the chat, and I will be addressing them at the end of the webinar. So the first part we're going to talk about is C1 connections. Okay, connections. It's first C in the 4 C's. And connections, the main point of a connection or connection activity is to link learners to the topic that you're going to be teaching, as well as linking the learners to the learners. So in the classroom, this is a little bit easier to do because you're all in the same classroom and the students can talk and do active activities. It's a little bit more difficult in an online setting, okay? Building connections in an online section can be challenging, but it's not impossible, okay? That's what we're going to go over today, is how to do this in an online setting and still make it good for you and your students. So for your online connection toolbox in your square, here's some ideas that I've come up with. And once you've heard these, if you have other ideas, please share them with us in our chat. Jamie will make a list of these and we can add them to the presentation before we share it, or also just compile a list to share with everybody. So make sure you add anything that you have or ideas or experience. So some of the ideas that I had are to a live discussion. So remember, we're connecting the students to the learning or to the topic and the students to each other. So a live discussion in an online forum such as Meet or Zoom, guided by the instructors, is always good. Remember, this should be short, but interactive. So maybe if the instructor comes up with a question and lets the student discuss it, something that ties them to the topic, this would be a good forum. A Google Form questionnaire, which is what we did at the beginning of this presentation. A short questionnaire that takes a minute, maybe 2 at the most, to fill out. And then I like Google Forms because it allows us, just like we did at the beginning, to see a graphic representation of what the class chose without putting any one person on the spot. So you can get a kind of idea of where your students are without making them put it out there if they're wrong, kind of more anonymity. Poll Everywhere is a good program to use. I've put the link up here for Poll Everywhere. You do have to create an account. There is paid versions of it. However, I've been very happy with the free version. It allows you to do questionnaires. It allows you to, where the students can see in real time as everybody's answering it. It allows you to do word clouds, multiple choice. There's all sorts of different things. You can do an interactive map on there. So it's definitely worth checking out to get ideas for a connection or even a lesson later on. Breakout activities. It's it seems like the 2 main meeting programs that people are using these days seem to be Meet, Google Meet, or Zoom. Those are the 2 that I hear about. I'm sure there's others out there. Google Meet does not have breakout rooms available. So some of the suggestions I've had is to use an online, a shared document where all of your students are working on the same document together for an activity. Or you can also break people into groups and create groups in Google Hangouts where they can either chat with each other or they can do a video call with just their team to discuss or work on whatever activity you're giving them. In Zoom, I don't use it very often myself, but it's my understanding that they do have ways to create breakout rooms where you can send different people to different discussion groups and then have them come back and meet in the main forum after the discussion. So this gives you an opportunity to do group work with your students. An online scavenger hunt. This is something that can be done either prior to the class starting or at the beginning of class, where the instructor gives them a topic or some information to find, and they can go onto the web, find the information, and then meet back and share it with the students, with their classmates. And then there's also a think, write, share, which is basically, again, you're giving them a question or a topic to think about. Give them a few minutes to think about it, to write down a few sentences or a paragraph about the topic, and then come back into the meeting and share it, take turns sharing their ideas with the class. As I said, there's probably a whole lot of other things that you can do. If any of you have any other great ideas for connection activities, please share them with us in the chat. But remember that a connection activity needs to be able to connect learners to the topic. It needs to be specific, learners to the topic and learners to each other. So they need to have some of collaboration or some way that they're interacting with each other. Okay, now this is not an actual C, okay? But this is really important when you're creating a lesson plan based on the 4 C's, is you want to do the connection activity first. That should be the very first thing that students are doing when they come into your class, okay? Put the welcome, any introductions, announcements, anything like that after the connection activity, okay? So they're going to do that activity, get a little bit involved in what you're doing, then they can hear all that information about what you're going to talk about today, anything, any instructions that you have for them, things like that. That comes after the connections. Okay, let's do a little pop quiz. So in the chat box, I want you to tell me which statement on the right, or which statements, there's more than one, on the right are examples of effective C1 connection activities that connect learners to the topic and learners to each other. So I'm just going to read them out loud in case anybody's having trouble reading this. A says each learner takes turns introducing themselves to the class. B, learners are instructed to search the internet for information about the lesson topic, then share it with the class. C says learners answer questions on a form, then the instructor shows the results to compare with other learners. And D says the instructor starts the class with a story about when he or she was learning this subject. So I want you to put in the chat A, B, C, or D, whichever you think are effective examples of a C1 connection activity.
All right, so I'm looking at the chat. I got A, B, C, C and D, B and C. A, B, and C, B and C, a couple of people said B and C, A, B and C, and A. So it was
Okay.
pretty spread out. Mm-hmm.
Pretty spread out, that's right. Okay, so let's look at the topic, at the questions here. So the first one says, each learner takes a turn introducing themselves to the class. While this does connect learners to learners, this does not have anything to do with the topic of the lesson. So it's not considered an effective connection activity. This might be more what you call an icebreaker. Okay, so we're going to say no, that one doesn't count. The next one, learners are instructed to search the internet for information about the lesson topic, then share it with the class. This one does both. This connects, it has the learners doing the research, so they're active and connecting to the topic, and then by sharing it with the class, it's connecting them with the other classmates. Okay, so that one is a good one. C says learners answer questions on a form, then the instructor shows the results to compare with other learners. Okay, this also does both. This allows them to answer questions related to the topic, and then they get to see how their other classmates answered and compare their own. So while they're not necessarily talking to other classmates, they are connecting to them in some way. So C is a good one. D, the instructor starts the class with a story about when he or she was learning the subject. that might connect the learners to the topic, but it has no interaction for the students. It has nothing where they're connecting to each other. So D is gone. So the correct answer for this one would be B and C are both effective C1 connection tools. So remember that those connections have to do both things. Okay, so let's build a lesson. I have a lesson plan template here, and there's a lot of different lesson plan templates out there. This is one that I particularly like because it's based specifically on the 4 C's. And I'm going to I've got a lesson plan created here. And so I'm just going to kind of go through as we do this and show you what I've put in this lesson plan. So the first part is the title. And for this one, I'm doing a lesson plan on price value, something simple to get us started with. And so we've got student learning outcomes. These are important because remember that a lesson plan is not only to guide you in your lessons, but also if somebody had to fill in for you, they can use this to present the lesson as well. So you need to be very specific and let them know what is expected at the end of this lesson. So I have some learning outcomes here, and specifically what the students should know at the end of the lessons. Now, for this lesson plan, I have not come up with the standards. If you're interested in the standards, there may be a webinar here in the future that talks about coming up, meeting the standards and how to put them in a lesson plan. But for what I'm doing right now, we're going to skip over that. And then total lesson time for this one, I'm going to put 45 minutes. Okay, this is not a real long lesson. Okay, so we've talked about C1 connections. Connections need to be a learning activity that connects students to students and students to the goal. So for this lesson plan, I am going to put goal setting. Okay, and I'm putting this specifically in as specifically as possible. So what am I going to say to the students? I'm going to tell the students that before we start this lesson, we're going to take a few minutes to think of ways to strengthen your understanding of whole numbers and how this will benefit you. Okay, it's not teaching them anything here necessarily, but it's getting them thinking about the topic. So for this one, we're doing goal setting, and I'm going to tell them that to, on their paper, answer the following 2 questions. So how to use numbers and mathematics in your daily, or how do you use numbers and mathematics in your daily life? And what tasks would be easier if you were more confident about your math skills? So we're going to give them a few minutes to answer those questions and actually write them down. So they're writing down their goals. And then as the instructor, I'm going to share my screen with a blank Google Doc on it, and then I'm going to go around and have each student share their answers to the questions. And as they do that, I'm going to type summaries or short versions, keywords, things like that on the document so that the students can see, again, what the other students are coming up with. Similar to writing on a whiteboard, but I don't have a whiteboard, so I'm going to use a document. So that's my activity. It connects the learners to the topic, gets them thinking about math and whole numbers, and lets them share with each other as well. Okay, so let's go back here. So that's the first part of my lesson. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. The second part that we're going to talk about, or the second section, is C2, concepts. Okay, so you can move to your second section on your paper. And the main idea of this with concepts is to teach your content in small chunks of 10 to 20 minute segments. Especially sitting on a computer and just listening to someone talk for a long time without having any activity or anything to interact with, they're going to lose focus after the first 10 minutes, and you're not going to be teaching them much of anything. So we want to keep it in small chunks. They say 10 to 20 minutes on here. Other places I've read 7 to 10 minutes. Okay, the shorter your lessons are, your talking is, the better you're going to keep your students more engaged. Okay, so when teaching online, the students often don't have printers. At least that's my experience. Instead of giving them a graphic organizer, something you might hand out, why not show an example and have them draw their own? Okay, I've got 3 examples here on the screens. These are Google, off of Google. You could do a Google search, go to images, and you can find tons of different graphic organizers to fit just about any different topic. But you can see these are very simple, easy for the students to draw. And then as you're lecturing and you're teaching them the subject, they have places to fill in the blanks, and it makes it easier for them to remember the information, because not only are they listening to you, they're writing, and they also have these visual guides to allow them to follow along and to refer back later on. You can also do like what we did here, have the students make their own by folding them, just like we did at the beginning of this. You could fold them into 4 sections. You could get creative and try to have them figure out how to make 6 sections or 8 sections or just 2, depending on what it is that your topic demands. Okay, the next important thing is to keep the learning active. Follow each content chunk with a 1-minute review. Okay. Teach for 7 to 10 minutes or even 10 to 20 minutes, but then give them time to actually do something if they're not already doing something. Even if they're taking notes on a graphic organizer, give them a little review. So, as far as tools for your toolbox, these are concept review tools. So remember that your delivery of the information is your job as a teacher, right? Whether you're giving them a video or you're online doing a live lesson with them, whatever method you're using, giving them something to read, whatever method you're using to teach, that's up to you. The reviews tools are what I'm going to focus on here and how to do that. So some ideas for your toolbox might be a 1-sentence summary. The learners write and share 1-sentence summaries of the main ideas presented so far. Remember, it doesn't have to be long or intense. It's just getting them to stop and think about what you've already delivered. A math review. You might give one problem, let each learner solve it on their own, and then have them share the answers with the class or work it out on your screen so that they can see how you did it. But let them do it first. Whoops. See, I'm jumping the gun. Another idea is share the question. Have each learner write a content-related question in the chat, and then you as the instructor can choose a question and ask a specific other student to answer it. Okay, this is based off of something you might do in a classroom setting, a face-to-face setting, where each person would answer or write a question and then pass it to the person on their right or the left. Since we can't pass, we can have the instructor pass virtually. And then another idea, which I really like, is the pop quiz idea, which is what we've been doing here in this webinar. And quizzes can be multiple choice, myth or fact. We said earlier fact or fiction. It's the same thing, true or false. It's just other words for those. It can be fill in the blanks. There's a lot of different ways, but it's just to get them to think about what you've been teaching them. So let's go on to our next pop quiz. And you can go ahead. These are myth or fact. So after you read these, I want you to type in the chat again and either put myth or fact, whichever you think is correct. So the first question says, if you have a lot of information to cover, lecturing for a full 50 minutes and then taking a 10-minute break is an effective method of instruction. Is that myth or fact?
All right, the consensus is myth.
It looks like it. Myth, myth, myth.
Yeah.
Good job. That is, in fact, a myth. So you may be able to cover all the material, but this is the least effective method of instruction as far as learner retention of content is concerned. Learners need time to think about, write about, and discuss the information being learned as they learn it. Okay? It's easier for them to remember if they're reviewing it as they learn it rather than waiting till the very end and possibly forgetting their questions. Okay, let's do the next one. So again, myth or fact. It's wise to divide your content into smaller segments and engage learners in short, quick review activities between segments because they will remember more of the content this way. Is that myth or fact? Oh, you guys are on the ball. Fact, 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 and more facts. Awesome.
Great job.
Okay, so this is a fact. Research from cognitive neuroscience proves that the human brain learns better and can retain information longer when learning is interspersed with short periods of active review. Good job. Okay, and our last myth or fact. When learners take notes while listening to a lecture, they will remember more of the material, especially if the instructor pauses to allow time for learner reflection and writing. Is that a myth or a fact? Awesome. See, they're on the ball. You'd think they were all teachers or something. Okay, so this is a fact. More of the brain is engaged when learners have time to think about and write about what they heard. So, good job. All right, so let's go back to our lesson plan now. And we were just talking about concepts. Let's see, we introduced the topic. Oh, wait, where did we miss something? We did. But let's go to concepts here. Okay, so in the concept section, we are going to put, bear with me a minute, I'm jumping from tab to tab here. So learning activities. Oh. Hey, this worked in the practice.
It sure did.
It sure did, huh? I'm having trouble copying here. All right, there we go. All right, learning activities. Sorry, you know what they say, everybody, right? Technology is great when it works.
Yep.
We got to figure out ways to make it work and be on our feet and improvise. All right, so my learning activities, as you can see in this plan, I've got learning activities divided up into different areas. Because as we said, for the concept, we want to do it in smaller chunks. So for this particular activity, the first thing I'm giving them is a little short, quick game. Pick a number, having the students pick a number between 1 and 100, have them type it into a chat in ascending order. And just a hint, I'm not giving them any instructions on ascending order yet. So it's a vocabulary word they can learn. Each student will then share their numbers with the class, and then the instructor can explain the words ascending, descending, and whole numbers. So we're getting a little bit of vocabulary in there along with some active learning by the students. See, I didn't delete that link. That went for something else. Okay, so their materials for this, they can have paper and pencil. They have the online discussion forum. Nothing too strenuous for them to do. The next learning activity that I have on here is going to be having students take out a paper and pencil for notes and showing them a Math Antics video on place value. So it's about a 9-minute video. As you can see, I've put the link here. So I'm going to share the video with them, have them watch it, and ask them to take notes while they're watching it. Okay, so they are getting the information, but they're doing it while they're taking notes. Okay, and then my 1-minute review after that part of the activity is going to be have them draw a picture to represent how many apples would be in the number 5,263. So this is something that he shows in the video. He uses apples as the example for the ones place and the tens place and the hundreds place. So basically, I'm just asking them to review what they did, what they learned in that video. And then we can have them each hold their picture up to the camera so that they can share it with their classmates. Now, if I had another learning activity after that, I can always add more. So with this template, I can take these three, I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to right click and say insert 3 rows below. And then I'm just going to paste that stuff that I copied. So as you can see, we kind of went over the paper here, but I can add as many or as few learning activities into this concept section as I need. Just one thing to keep in mind is once you've given them information that you want them to retain, make sure you do that 1-minute review in between content chunks so that they have a chance to think about what they've just learned. All right, let's go back to our presentation now. And we're going to learn the C3. So C3 is concrete practice. All right, so we're going to move on to your concrete practice square. And concrete practice, the main idea is we want to have learners do an active skills practice or an active review of content. We don't want to just, this is not a section to just tell them to go watch a video or to tell them to, okay, you're done now, sometime later on go do your homework. That's not what this is. We want them to have an opportunity to be actively involved in practicing these skills, and preferably along with their classmates so that we're still being collaborative and interactive. Okay, so some pointers for this one. Use concrete review activities that, one, actively involve and engage all the learners, not just a few. So that's kind of the responsibility of you as the instructor, is to make sure that you're pulling in the people, even those quiet ones that are usually sitting in the corner. Find a way to involve all of them in it. You want your concrete practice to be high energy, interesting, and meaningful to the learners. That's important. It needs to be meaningful to them. If it's not, they're not going to care about it. They're not going to pay attention to it. Whoops. And there I go again. Back, back, back. I need a computer that's not quite as jumpy as this one. or to stop touching the screen. Okay, so high energy, interesting, and meaningful. And we also want to reinforce the skills being learned or the information that has been taught. Okay, so remember the section before this was our concept where we're teaching them. This is our review. Okay, so some online tools for your toolbox. Again, you can use those breakout groups like we talked about before. Give them something to work out on, have them separate, work on it as a group, and then come back and share with the main class. You can also play a review game. Review games such as, if you were in my webinar last week for Google, we talked about using a Jeopardy template. We talked about using flashcards. There's also games like Kahoot or Quizzes that allow you to create a kind of interactive game that your students can use online. So any kind of review game, if you have ideas, please share them with us. You could do a pair or share, again, with the Google Docs. Some of these activities can be used for different C3 sections depending on how you apply them. So pair and share, again, having them work together on an activity and then coming back together and sharing it with the group. A discussion about how the content applies to them. Okay, that's making it meaningful, right? You're giving them all this information, but then making them or having them really think about, how does this apply to them? How can they use this? Why is it important? That sort of stuff. And again, that shared group document, you can do any of this stuff on a shared document as well. You could put a discussion question and have them each type in a different color on a shared document. Or if you're working on a writing assignment, give them each a portion of a writing assignment, have them do it and choose a different color, and have each of the students working on a different section, but all in the same document. So there's a lot of different applications you can use for that as well. So there's your tools. Again, if you have any other ideas to share, put them in the chat and we'll share them later on. Okay, the important thing to remember from this is that all learners must participate in the active review of a major concept. This is difficult to do when you're not necessarily looking at the students, when you're in a classroom with them. So an important thing for the instructor to do is to be aware of who's participating and who's not, so that you can find ways to draw in those kind of reticent learners. So make sure everybody participates. All right, let's do our last version of the pop quiz. This one is a fill in the blank. So I'm not going to ask you to put these into the chat, but you can just jot down your answers on a piece of paper. And I want you to think about what word or phrase completes each of these sentences on the screen. So write your answers on a paper, and in just a minute, I will go over the answers with you. Okay, so let's look at each of these questions. The first question says, the C3 concrete practice activities should involve and engage all of the learners, not just a few. Okay, an important concept there. It has to engage all of the learners. Number 2 says C3 concrete practice activities are always interesting and meaningful to the learners. Make sure that it has something to do, something that they can relate to. And number 3 says C3 concrete practice activities, whoops, where's my answer? There it is. Reinforce the skills being learned or the information that has been taught. Okay, remember, this is not giving them new information. We're just reinforcing what we've already taught them. So that's what the practice should be. So I noticed somebody earlier asked if I was using PowerPoint or Google Slides for this presentation. This is done in Google Slides with the animation tool to do the answers. So if anybody has questions about how to do this afterwards, please let me know, and I'd be happy to stay online and show you how to do this. Okay, so let's head back to our lesson plan. And we are now in concrete practice. Okay, let's see if I can do a better job copying this time. So, concrete practice. Now, this is just a quick practice. If I was spending more time on this activity, I would probably give them a little bit more practice than this, but just to show you some active things. This is an idea I had to put a large number. Now, in our learning objectives at the top, we said we were going to learn place value up to the billions place. So I've written a number up to the billions place, and I'm going to put this on the screen. And I'm going to go through my classroom and choose different students and have them tell me, for instance, what is the place value of the number 9? And they can share that. So by my going around and calling on different students, it allows everybody to be involved. And I also try to make it a safe place so that if they don't know the answer, it's okay. I understand. Let's look at this. And I do a little mini quick explanation of why, rather than just going to another student to ask for another answer. This way, everybody has a chance to participate and get a little bit of feedback or a little bit of instruction if they don't know it. And then the materials for this was just a shared screen with a larger number on it. Very simple materials, nothing excessive. So let's go back to the lesson planning or to our presentation now. So keep in mind that that concept section in the middle tends to be the longest one. The rest of these shouldn't take us too long to get through. So the last one is the C4 or the conclusions. So you're going to move on to your fourth square now. And we are in conclusions. So the most important part of this, or what you're going to do with this, is to give learners time to summarize and evaluate what they have learned. Okay? This is an opportunity to kind of rehash or think about everything that they've learned in this lesson. Okay? Learners also need to make a commitment to use the new skills or the new knowledge. Now, if you're giving them a math lesson like I am right now on place value, they're probably not going to be going out right away and using that in real life. So this can also be interpreted as, how are they going to practice, a commitment to practicing this? This is a good opportunity to include Google Classroom in this and create a follow-up assignment. Okay, it's a perfect place to create a follow-up assignment for what you've taught in class. Some things to think about or points to think about with a conclusion activity is, and again, these are all similar, just a little bit different. We want learners to be able to create a verbal or written summary of what they had learned. Remember, we don't just want to say, okay, go off and think about this. We want them to actually do something. So either talk about it, write it down, anything to summarize what they've learned. We want them to discuss or write how they plan to use what they've learned. We want them to do a verbal or a written evaluation of what they have learned. Okay, those are all a little bit different things, but all of them include talking or writing, discussing, but more than just thinking about it. And then finally, and I think this is something that everybody should do every time, it's up to you, but learners should celebrate the class completion and celebrate the collaboration that they've done with others. And this can be as simple as giving everybody a round of applause for finishing it, or thanking each other for the help that they've given, something to bring the lesson to a close. Okay, so some tools for your online toolbox for conclusion. One idea is an exit ticket. Before they leave the class or as soon as they leave the class, they can send you an email. I often have them tell me one or two things that they learned in the lesson, and then also something that they're confused about or something that they might have a question about, or a suggestion. If they have a suggestion of some way to do something better or something they'd like to learn, those can all be in exit tickets. And exit tickets online can be done through email. They can be done through Google Hangouts or other chat forums. They can also be done in Google Classroom. If you were to create a Google form with an exit ticket type questions on it, you could embed that into your classroom and allow students, just instruct them so that they know after each class they need to go in and they need to fill out the exit ticket form. So there's various ways that you can use an exit ticket. A conclusion can also be a class discussion about the most important concepts they learned and how they can apply to real life. And it can be a celebration time. Where, like I said, just kind of a pat on the back, or this activity here was one suggested, where learners take turns giving verbal compliments to specific class members for their contribution to the learning. So if you have some that have done a really good job of speaking up and participating in the discussions and giving ideas, this is a time where they can compliment each other. So different things, but something to reinforce and review, finalize, keep it in their head that they're done with the lesson, but reviewing what they did. So let's look at this last section here on, let's see, we're on conclusions. So my conclusion activity, oh, I didn't put a conclusion activity yet. So a conclusion activity I might do for this is to just have them do an exit ticket. Okay, exit ticket through email with the question of, what did you learn today? Okay, or what do you still need help with? Okay, and then I'm just going to go over real quick here this last part. I have a section at the bottom for Google Classroom activities or learning by doing. So this is where you might put an example of what you're going to put in Google Classroom along with any links that you have. So I would probably put homework, also known as practice or review. You might put some worksheets in there for them to do. You might put some sort of an activity in there to do. I would use it for that. Additionally, though, I would set up my Google Classroom assignment to be available for students who didn't make it to class. So in order to do that, you might go back through your lesson up here and add some of the stuff that you did in the lesson. Some of this vocabulary terms. You might include the video, the Math Antics video. You might include the 1-minute activity and have them uploaded into Google Classroom as an assignment. Okay, so 2 different purposes for using that Google Classroom forum or other delivery methods if you're not using Google Classroom, to give them some extra practice outside of the lesson. All right, let's go back here. Okay, so my conclusion for this webinar is to thank you for attending this webinar, and I would like to ask you to click on this. Jamie, if you could put this into the chat, that would be great.
Yes,
But to go to this form and fill out the questionnaire. It's just a review on how I did and how you liked the webinar. And also, please, if you have any suggestions, go ahead and add those suggestions in there so that we can make webinars that are meaningful for you in the future. So take a few minutes to do that.
And I just put it in the chat, so if you want to just click on that before you head out of the webinar, open up a new window and you can do that.
Okay, and then while everybody's doing that, I'm going to open this up for any questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask them. If you would rather not speak, you can type it into the chat. And Jamie, did we have any questions along the way?
It was just one question asking if you were using PowerPoint or Google Slides for your presentation. So I did answer that. Okay. Because I know you're using Google Slides. So that's,
I am using Google Slides. I like Google Slides. You could do just about anything in Google Slides that you can do in PowerPoint. There's not quite as many animations or templates in there. However, you can find all kinds of templates online that you can upload into Google Slides. So do we have any questions?
Nothing yet from the chat, anyway.
It looks like we still have
but
a
again,
couple.
Please feel free to unmute yourselves. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi, Carlos.
Hello, Carlos.
Hey, how are you, all of you? Thank you so much for the great presentation.
Oh, thank you.
I really just want to make a comment. You had a very good ideas, and I can be efficient a while in the classroom, but when this thing turn out and online, it's just really had some kind of hard time. I can play with the technology, but how to make a class very friendly and welcoming and very smooth going, it requires more to engage the classes. I mean, the students. So thank you so much. I got a good ideas. And my question is, can you share with us the lesson plan that you were breaking down in C1, C2, C3, and C4?
Absolutely. I'm going to share a blank lesson plan with everybody, the template.
Mhm.
And I can also include the one that I've been putting together as a reference for you. So yeah, and then once you're looking at that, if you have any questions, just feel free to send me an email and I'd be happy to help you out with that.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mm.
Thank you for all the effort you do. I know it's much more difficult to teach online than it is in the classroom. We need more experience with that. So thank you. Any other questions?
Looks like Peggy raised her hand. So Peggy, do you want to unmute yourself?
Hi, thank you so much for these suggestions. I just had a question that I noticed that you, Kristen, have your picture up rather than live video. And I just wanted to get a little feedback on that in terms of engaging learners.
Generally, when I'm doing a class, I do have my picture, my face up and not the picture. I'm working, the location that I'm working at right now is not super pretty. So for the webinar, I just turned my camera off. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are you still in your pajamas working from home like I am?
I am not. I actually did get dressed for this. I even did my hair. But like I said, here I can undo myself for a minute.
That's okay.
I'll prove it. I really am. Hi everyone.
Hi.
I don't know if you can see me there. See, I do have my clothes on. It's just that I don't have a great background, so I tend to put my picture up instead. But I do agree with you. When I'm teaching a class, I like to have myself live like this because I think it makes it more personable with the students.
May I ask a follow-up question?
Sure. Absolutely.
So in terms of that, do you have any tips for not looking good on camera, but for being like effective? Like, I know you said you don't have a good background right now, but I find that I'm really expressive with my hands and stuff. And then when I look back at myself, I think, wow, that's really distracting.
You know what? I don't really have any tips for that because I do the same thing. I tend to talk with my hands, which is actually another reason why I keep my screen on, because I feel that, you know, them seeing me being real is important. You know, most of our students, especially students that we've had with us for a while, tend to be able to relate. You know, we're in similar situations that they're in, and so, you know, having this, yeah, I'm not in a perfect place. I went out to a shed to find myself a quiet place to work, because I too have a family running around the house, and sitting at the kitchen table is not my best choice for being able to work. So, you know, I just try to be as real as possible with my students and let them know that it's a hardship for me too, and that I can relate with the troubles that they're having. But I did find, as far as your question about the pajamas, I have read several reports that say in order to keep us as professional as possible and still working, it's always a good idea to still act like you're going to work. You know, just because we're at home, not necessarily slack off all the time, and, you know, still do your hair, still do your makeup if you wear makeup, dress in decent clothes, that sort of stuff.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One more thing, can I say something?
Sure, Carlos.
I work with pretty 90% with Latino community, and since new way to teaching online, you know, most of my population, they have a difficult typing, you know, and I would like to see maybe in the future, you guys, if you can help us to give some techniques how we can prepare to a student to type and a computer or tablets, because it's something that I think need now for my population that I work with.
You know, there's and I'm sure there's a lot of different ones out there. But one of the programs that I use is just called typing.com.
Typing.com.
Typing.com. And the thing I like about typing.com is that you can go in as an instructor and you can create a class in there and invite your students. And it has very basic lessons on typing. It also has games that they can play once they become a little more proficient to make practicing more fun. But you as the instructor can also go in and be able to see how much time they've done and what they've done and their improvement. So you can run reports on your students' activity in there. And it's a free program. So you check that out.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions?
Nothing else in the chat. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop the recording.
All right. Well, thank